Well, hello, scholars. Uh, just wanted to stop and share I guess, a few thoughts or ideas, mostly from the Board Book by Bowen, and um, and why I think this class is so important. Now, I'm going to be honest and admit, uh, one of the reasons why I was interested in teaching this class when I was first asked to do so was because I had an experience on a nonprofit board that um I'll just call it perplexing. I was asked to serve on the board of a nonprofit here in Douglasville, and I thought I was being asked. Well, and they somewhat alluded to it because I was asked to apply for the position. Um, because I don't think I'd even heard of the organization. And I think the chairperson of the board was in another organization that I was affiliated with at the time. It happened to be Leadership Douglas. I was in that. And she approached me and said that they had an opening on the board, and she thought with my leadership background that I would be perfect for it. And so, of course, I'm always looking for opportunities to serve the community. So I said, sure. And she sent me the application. Now, I will have to admit, I thought it was a little odd that the application stated that I was to submit a check for $500 as a donation along with the application. I'm like, Now, you've asked me to apply because of my leadership background and how the organization could use it. And in addition to that, I have to give you $500. Well, it's the organization represents a good cause, and I believe that we're blessed to be a blessing. And so I wrote the check for $500. Didn't think much of it. Was added to the board. Um, Attending meetings, and I noticed that the only thing or I won't say the only thing, but our primary discussion was about fundraising. Well, anybody that knows me will know I loathe fundraising with every fiber of my being. When my children were young, I wrote a check to whatever it was, Boy Scouts, Jack and Jill, whatever it was, anything to keep from going out and asking people for money for anything. I would rather give you a check. And the same with my ministry. My ministry has always been financed through my own personal resources, um, and having to ask people to pay for something. I do have an annual breakfast every year. I've done it now for, I guess, the past 7 or 8 years. And uh, the people that come to the breakfast, when I moved it to a hotel, they have to pay to come to that because there's, a significant fee involved. But when I had the breakfast at the clubhouse where I live, I charge nothing. And every year, the hardest thing I have to do in ministry is to ask people to pay to come to the brunch. And I only charge them exactly what the hotel charges me for their brunch. And everything else, the speakers, musicians, sound person, I pay out of my pocket. The trinkets, women love trinkets at things. And so whatever the goodie bag is, I pay for all of that out of my pocket. And so the thought of being in an organization and they thought that I was going to do all this fundraising. No, so after about a year, um, well, one of the things I did, I went back through the orientation material because there was a little orientation. Well, none of that was mentioned. So after a year of this, I spoke with the president or the head of the board. And I told her that I noticed that really the only thing we were discussing to a large degree was fundraising, and that I had no desire or intention to raise fund. I'm like, if I'm not willing to do it for my own ministry, I'm not doing it for another organization. And that I was a little, bewildered by this. And she said, well, yeah, as a board member, that is your primary responsibility. So I let her know it wasn't a match for me, that it's a good organization. I don't mind making a donation every year. And I do still try to make a donation every year. I said, but if that's what my role on the board is as a fundraiser, that's not going to happen. And so I need to get off the board, and I did get off the board. So when Dr. Clemens approached me about teaching this class, about a year after that, I leaped at the opportunity because I said, well, now, I'll learn more about what does it really mean to be on a board, a nonprofit board. And so certainly the board book has answered pretty much all of those questions. And when you read the book, it talks about, you know, or I shouldn't say it, Bowen discusses what does the board do, and he lists, what is this, 1, 2, 7, I'm thumbing through, lists 8 things that the board does. Um, and basically, when you sum it all up and you look at the 8 things, they basically oversee, they don't operate the nonprofit, but they oversee the operations of the nonprofit. And so that's one of the things that we have to be clear about uh, when we talk about the responsibility of the board. It's not to run the board and do the work. I mean, it's not to run the nonprofit and do the work of the nonprofit, but it's to oversee it. And number one, make sure that that it has the leadership that it needs. So it says select, encourage, advise, evaluate, compensate, and if necessary, replace the CEO. So they make sure that the nonprofit itself has suitable leadership. And there are people that, like I said, they start a nonprofit, they create a board, and they are surprised to learn that the board can actually fire them. And we've seen incidents where, I mean, years ago, I remember was a pastor of a church. He lost his job. He was found guilty of, I can't remember what it was. Um, but the church was operated as a nonprofit. That nonprofit had a board, and when the pastor was found guilty of whatever the indiscretion was, the board fired him. So, you can be fired from the very nonprofit that you've started yourself. Um, so that's one of the responsibilities. Um, Review and approve the strategic direction. Now, the CEO of the board, I mean of the nonprofit, leads that effort to develop a strategic plan, but the board has to approve that. Then the board has responsibility to monitor performance. Um, are the people doing what they should do? Are the goals being met that the nonprofit has? So, performance measurement is a big part of what the board is to do. So ensure the organization operates responsibly as well as effectively. So, making sure that they're doing all the right things, the things that'll keep it from getting, as they say, in the funny paper. Act on specific policy recommendations and mobilize support for decisions taken. So it's to help the nonprofit um, execute decisions that have been made and do those things well. Provide a buffer for the president or CEO, um, and basically take some heat. So, if the CEO of the organization um, is under scrutiny for something and generally and shouldn't be, will be there for them, have their back. Ensure the necessary resources, both human and financial, will be available to pursue the organization's strategic and achieve its or the organization strategies and achieve its objectives. And so that's where that whole fundraising piece comes in. That, like I said, the board is responsible for fundraising and helping to make sure that the organization, the nonprofit, has the resources that it needs. And, a lot of people start nonprofits thinking they're going to get all their money from grants. Well, the reality is when you apply for grants, often the application asks, okay, well, how much money do you have that you're contributing? You know, they don't want organizations to think that they're just trying to operate solely on grant money, but they are putting some skin in the game as well. And the board has that responsibility for seeing, helping make sure that there are additional funds available over and above what the organization may be getting from grants. And there's a saying that you that board members give as much as they can, and when they've given all they can, they get off. And fresh new people come on board. And I remember when I was on the board of that organization, they were saying, asking us, "Don't you have friends with deep pockets?" You know, So once we've given all we can give, we have hit up everybody that we know and they've given all they're going to give, then it's time to get off the board because to some degree your usefulness is over with, or at least in that key responsibility. And so you move off to bring in some fresh new board members who have new friends with deep pockets, and they also have more money to give. It says then nominate suitable candidates for election to the board and establish and carry out an effective system of governance at the board level. And I one of the things I think we talk about it next week. I know we talk about it next week is how do you build the board. Um, and I've often said that that organization that recruited me needs to do a better job of recruiting um, and letting potential board members know or prospective board members know exactly what is expected of them as it relates to the fundraising. Um, and I have to admit, I didn't really in the year or so I was there, I really didn't see us doing a lot of these other things. We had one person that was managing the money, and I was supposed to be on the finance committee with him. Well, he never seemed to have time to have a meeting. He would say, "Well, I've taken care of everything. I'm doing everything. I don't have time for a meeting." And I was always a little suspect of that because one of the key factors is accountability. Um, and the board should really make sure that the organization, the nonprofit, is operating at a high level of accountability. And when you have a board member who has committee members but is operating outside of them, not including committee members in the work that he or she's doing, it's hard to be accountable when everything you're doing is pretty much undercover. So I have to admit, I was always concerned about that. One of the things that Bowen discusses about return on mission, and that, it says nonprofit boards concentrate on developing and carrying out broad strategies for enhancing shareholder values. Nonprofit boards are much more committed to the particular mission of their organization. And so, like Bowen says that a for-profit company, when what they're building or whatever no longer is necessary, they can just dissolve the company. Well, nonprofits are mission-based. Everything they do is to support a particular mission, and they need to stay engaged as long as that mission uh, is still necessary. And very often, the mission of nonprofit organizations are things that really transcend time, that, they're very long term needs, societal needs. And so, therefore, as long as that need exists, there should be the nonprofit should exist, and therefore a board should exist as well. Um, Bowen talked about the changing context and constraints. And, one of the things he discussed was this the new regulatory responsibilities have been put in place after Enron. When Enron went bankrupt because of wrongdoing in the company, and a lot of it was going on because there were no checks and balances. Well, then the Security and Exchange Commission uh, set up new standards to regulate nonprofits and how they operate, particularly from a financial perspective. And so that's one of the things that the board has to do is just make sure that nonprofits are operating, like I said, ethically, uh, but also effectively and efficiently. You can be doing something that's ethical, but not necessarily effective and efficient. And so all of those E's really apply when you're monitoring the performance of a nonprofit. And like I said, and that is an essential responsibility of the board. Let's see, was there anything else in here? That's kind of it for chapter one. I just wanted to share, like I said, my thoughts on, um, what is the role and the responsibility of boards, why boards are needed. Like I said, and so they're needed to do those 8 things uh, that Bowen discussed, making sure that that there is a board and that there's good leadership, making sure that there's sound leadership for the nonprofit, making sure that the nonprofit's performance both the nonprofit and the board's performance is being monitored and measured, making sure the nonprofit has the resources that it needs, that it is being held um, accountable to the mission of the nonprofit. You can't have a mission and the nonprofit is doing something differently. A for-profit can kind of change what it's doing, and they often do that to meet changes in society and things. But a nonprofit, it exists for that particular mission, and it has responsibility to the mission that has been established. And then, like I said, just making sure that they're operating effectively. So I will also be honest to say that after that one experience, uh, I decided working on a board is not for me. And I have been approached. I would say almost every year I'm approached, and I'm approached a lot with female students from Mercer. I have been blessed to have some of the best students in the world, and a lot of them I'm Facebook friends with, and so I see the things that they are accomplishing, and it's far above anything that I ever hoped or dreamed of. And a lot of them have nonprofits. A lot of the females, particularly, have nonprofits to mentor young ladies. And I'm always asked to serve on the board. And when I'm asked, my response is it to help fundraise? Is fundraising one of the responsibilities? And they always say yes, and I always say no. Or sometimes I'll say, uh, I'd love to assist you in your organization. If being on the board means that I have to fundraise, then I'm not the person for you. And then they don't pursue any longer. Because that, like I said, that really is one of the fundamental responsibilities of a board member. And so I have to be true to myself as well as true to the other person. Fundraising is something that I'm not going to do for anybody. And so I have to make sure that I'm, in my serving, I'm still, being true to myself and serving with joy. And then I have to be true to the person that has asked me to serve on the board and not have them thinking that I'm going to do something that I'm not going to do. Now, all these other things, the other 7 things that Bowen discussed, I'd be more than happy to do those. But for the most part, especially when a nonprofit is first starting out, the fundraising is probably one of the major things because they just need money to operate. And there's very few things, that you can do without money. Not that all the organizations I've been asked to support are religious based, but there's a saying, salvation is free, but ministry costs. Well, ministry, and as I consider nonprofit as ministry, because ministry is just helping others. And so whether it's really a religious based or whatever, I still put it in that context, and it costs money. So I can't have people thinking that I'm going to assist in that effort other than writing a check annually to help the cause. So that's for me for this week. I hope you enjoy the reading and that we have, and I looked out there to see if anybody had posted their introductory video, and no one has yet. But when you do, I will view them and will post a response to each person. So I look forward to viewing your introductions. Have a wonderful day.